Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting tonight. And thank you all for coming out here. My name is Erica. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the events assistant here at Books Are Magic. Before we get started officially, I do want to go over some housekeeping points for tonight. First off, we kindly ask that you keep your mask on at all times while at this event. Towards the end of the event, we will be doing an audience raised hand Q&A. So start thinking of questions to ask now and raise your hand when the time comes. After the talk tonight, Fariha will be signing and personalizing books at the desk near the side door. We also have additional books available to purchase from my colleague Anna at the front. If you are joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we highly encourage you to buy a copy of Who is Wellness For online using the link in the live stream description. Alright, so tonight it is my privilege to introduce Fariha, Róisín, and Zeba, Blay, who are here to discuss Fariha's new book, Who is Wellness For? This blend of cultural criticism and memoir sparks powerful discussion of the wellness industry and its insidious nature of commodifying Black, brown, and indigenous spaces. Fariha is a thunderous and investigative voice as she navigates how intergenerational trauma, abuse, and unprocessed emotions manifest in our bodies and how it affects daily life. In this book, Fariha answers the titular question with her own, "Wellness isn't for anyone if it isn't for everyone," and triumphantly carves out the space to make it so. Fariha Róisín is a multidisciplinary artist based in Los Angeles, California. As a Muslim queer Bangladeshi, she is interested in the margins, liminality, otherness, and the mercurial nature of being. Her work has pioneered a refreshing and renewed conversation about wellness, contemporary Islam, and queer identities and has been featured in the New York Times, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, and Vogue. She is the author of the poetry collection How to Cure a Ghost, as well as the novel Like a Bird. Zeba Blay is a writer and cultural critic who has contributed to publications including the New York Times, The Village Voice, Essence, Shadow and Act, Film Quarterly, and IndieWire. Formerly senior culture writer at HuffPost, Blay has spent her career writing about pop culture at the intersection of race, gender, and identity. In 2021, she published her debut essay collection, Carefree Black Girls, which was chosen by Kirkus as one of the best nonfiction books of the year. Alright, folks, so without further delay, everyone please give a very warm welcome to Fariha and Zeba. Hello.
Hello. Oh, how are we doing this?
Oh.
Whoops. Yep.
You can do it there. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. Whew.
Woo. I know. This is a long time coming. This is really exciting. I know you're about to read a passage from the book. But before you do, I just have to say, here, I hope you have tissues, because the bitch is about to cry. It is so fucking exciting to just be sitting here with you. It feels like a culmination of so much. And I just had to say, before we get into this, that I'm so incredibly proud of you. I'm so proud of you, and you've written a beautiful, beautiful book. And I'm so glad that everyone here and everyone out there gets to read it, because I think that it has the power to change a lot in the world, and you should be proud. So,
Thank you. I love you.
I love you.
This is going to be a very emotional night. I haven't really cried anywhere else, but I feel like I'm going to cry tonight because I'm with one of my best friends, and it's the anniversary of Two Brown Girls. It's like the 10-year anniversary. We started in 2012, our podcast that we did together, and so it's like, it feels very immense. So we're going to have a conversation later. I'm going to read from the book. But thank you for being here. I'm really grateful. I'm going to read the chapter on IBS. It's called On IBS. I have IBS, and thank you. Thank you. Did someone woo me, or did I just make that up? Thank you. I need it. Okay. My gut issues started at 14. The blistering palpitations, the wretched, unruly heat my stomach would generate like a nuclear bomb testing site. It would take over my life when it came, penetrating every pore, causing so much chaos in my body and pain that would last for days on end. After the first few months of this, I began to see and feel this visceral connection between my mother and me whenever I had an onset of IBS. Like she could short circuit my body, bringing me to my knees, just through her mind. I could feel her even when she wasn't close, because that's how connected we were. That was the first explanation I had for my IBS, even as a teenager. It didn't make sense, but in my universe, I guess it did. When I first spoke to my sister about what was happening, I would tell her it was like I could feel my mother's rage in my stomach like a galactic swirl, except it was a black hole of cramps, like a bat signal in my body. It would come and go at a whim, exiting me in shreds like a hurricane leaving a small town. The weak core, my white yoga teacher pointed out, is a result of trauma, intergenerational and my own, which is a stored physical energy in my body that was perhaps created as an energetic entry point by my mother. I don't know how else to explain it other than there were no boundaries between us. I was so porous to her, and because she controlled every action and watched every move, my body became controlled by her moods and needs. My IBS, I believe, became a direct embodiment of this. I felt so powerless around her, primarily because I had been conditioned to believe by her that she was an authority figure, a god, so much so that she could punish me even when I wasn't physically close to her. I was the perfect, compliant captive because I believed her. I believed in her power over me. In the chakra system, IBS is directly located where the solar plexus resides, and a blocked solar plexus represents low self-esteem, shame, and unworthiness. I mean, you can't make this shit up. In the world of health and wellness, there's an inconsistent belief that if you try hard enough at something, eventually you will see results. What's so dangerous about this thinking is that when a body can't do certain things because of its sometimes unknown limitations, the body is then subtly, or not so subtly, societally ostracized. Just by virtue of the world being catered to able-bodiedness, we forget bodies are still valuable, irrespective of what they can or cannot do. Chronic pain became a safe way to engage with my body at a distance. It was an added buffer, a shield for me. When I was focusing on one pain, I wasn't looking at the other. As the Buddha reminds us, if the body is not cultivated, the mind cannot be cultivated. If the body is cultivated, then the mind can be cultivated. I wasn't finding balance because I was in constant avoidance of myself. The body's pain was a way to deflect the mind's trauma. Yet the irony is that when your body keeps the score, your body keeps the score because your mind wants to forget the tally. Even if we are unconscious to it, what we experience becomes stored quantitative data. As a child, well into adulthood, I lived in fear all of the time. I never felt safe. I became hypervigilant to my body's sensations, yet I was also completely confused by what I felt. The pain didn't add up to the memory, or vice versa. Such sharp attention and awareness are a product of abuse, as your body is always tuning in to the possibility of attack. But because nothing has identified the root of the issue, you go into overdrive, believing everything could be a possible violator. I had to be prepared to defend myself at any time, whether physically, emotionally, or mentally. Living like this was an impossible reality. The more I thought about it, however, the more I came to realize that the gut is the home of intuition, and therefore I had to learn how to trust mine. Now I understand that my mother's abuse had created a bond that had morphed into a portal that linked me directly to her. I hated that she could do this. I hated how thin-skinned I was. I already felt surveilled and on edge constantly, frightened that she was always watching me. All of this resulted in a hazing of my body, especially where my stomach and all the sexual parts of myself. If I veiled myself, if I self-actualized into a blob, something out of Hayao Miyazaki's universe, I wouldn't have to feel her conquer me. I realize I didn't trigger warn. There are some violent things that I'm going to be saying, so I just wanted to warn. When I started cutting, it became another distraction. If I cut myself somewhere I could control, then the pain would numb the stomach pain. It was a constant, cyclical void of pain I existed in. Instead of listening to what my body was trying to tell me and not knowing I could learn how to listen to her, I turned on myself. This became a dynamic where I was then mistrustful of myself because the pain in my insides was not being validated by an authority figure. I was forced to believe that I was fine. When I would say I wasn't, my mother would eye me suspiciously, cocking her head, only to tell me all the places she was hurt. But did I see her complaining? My father would deflect, kindly telling me I'd feel better soon. And why wouldn't I be? I wasn't starving. I had a home, 2 parents, food on the table. I knew I should be grateful, so I was. The good girl believes something like, one day mommy, daddy will be full, and then they will give me what I need. Bethany Webster writes aptly in Discovering the Inner Mother. The problem is that sometimes that day never comes. Instead, we become adults who experience high levels of stress when faced with everyday situations, like disappointing someone, receiving compliments, setting boundaries, and taking care of themselves. So then, some part of you, the good girl, begins to believe, because you are constantly told that your parents know best, especially more than you, that one day they will see you for who you are. See how broken and frail you are, and yet how hard you try, but how much you really need them. How all you want is their good, loving, safe touch. You want to be a child. As an adult, this will mean that people won't see the strain in your body. And like your parents, all they'll see is what they deem as success, never once questioning the impact it has on your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and sexual well-being to carry this much. To never be able to complain about what the cost has been on your psyche. So as a coping mechanism, because your parents don't witness you all the time, something inside of you begins to disconnect from your pain. Your sense of reality has to mimic theirs for your own survival. You begin to tell yourself that your needs are too much, and you convince yourself that the more perfect you are, the more wholesome, morally upright, intelligent you are, you will be loved, cherished, and adored. So you go on a hamster wheel, trying to perfect yourself. In that process, you forget you're unwell and that you have needs too. And you keep forgetting and keep forgetting. I've taught myself to perform in the face of extreme pain, dulling my senses. I've taught myself how to numb my body's quakes and shivers. I've hidden my true self, denied my body its right to speak to me, and participated in my own silencing again and again and again. Until very recently, I realized it didn't have to be this way. I took my IBS as a sign of my inherent weakness, as if I was too broken to be given a real body, one that wasn't always in revolt. The ableist ideas of being healthy were drilled into my brain, as well as my sister's, and the more our bodies revolted in different ways, the more we continued to be silenced by both our parents, or made fun of as when our food allergies, bodily reactions were always read as exaggerations instead of real things that had been determined by our own bodies because we knew them best. My parents would call both my sister and me extremists because of our sensitivities to gluten, sugar, and dairy, so I was forced to continue to eat normally or moderately so that I could grow accustomed to it, always being told that what my body knew to be true was again inherently wrong, or at the very least, amenable. I wish I had known earlier that if you compromise your own unknown needs for the tenacity of another's, there's always a personal cost. So the more I was that Fariha, the one that was together, composed, kind, but hidden, obstructed, even from myself, the less I could be the full Fariha, the whole Fariha, the one that was also tender, angry, frustrated, tired, but desperately, sickeningly wanting of love. According to Webster, the used child within us longs to be loved for her real self, not just when she is wearing the mask of the good girl and demonstrating patriarchal values, productive, perfect, conforming to expectations, making others look good, sacrificing, suppressing, etc. The used child longs to be loved when she disappoints you, when she is grumpy, when she is inconvenient, when she is messy, when she is confused, when she produces nothing, when she is inconsistent, when she is empty-handed, when she changes her mind. The reality I also found is that most adult humans I've encountered aren't very secure. Projections are always being placed. I found that I kept getting into circumstances where I would be intentionally misunderstood, or that I'd be put into positions where I would have to apologize for things I hadn't done just to keep the peace. This was my role as the negotiator. I was always the person who compromised, extended a hand, even when I was usually the one being misunderstood. This caused me to further shut down, to get deeper into the performance, out of a sense of self-defeat, that no matter what, I was the one who would have to succumb to other people's power over me. In my life, healing has been about integrating the fragments of mind, body, and spirit that were shattered by trauma. As I nurtured and braided all these disparate parts of myself together, a more honest version of me began to form. The more I thought about this, on a micro level, as an individual, the more I began to see a parallel between the earth and humans. If I could heal myself, and what I mean by this is largely about acceptance. It's healing to accept a failing body and tell that body, I love you unconditionally. Maybe then we would have more proof for a way to collectively heal the earth too. Because the earth, like our own bodies, needs so much love, nurturance, and gentleness from us. I'm going to end it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading that. Ooh, child. I know, I'm sure there's many of you here right now who are listening to that and being like, yes, check, 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 like that all applies to me. I know I was feeling that, particularly with just the fuckery of dealing with your parents and dealing with their inability to see you and how painful that can be. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But before we get into that, I think I wanted to start our conversation with a question I like to ask anyone I'm in conversation with, particularly you, because I haven't seen you in so long, and you have just ushered a new book into the world, and you're on this whole journey, which releasing work into the world is such a discombobulating thing. And so my first question to you is, how are you? How are you feeling? How's your heart? Where are you in this moment?
I was reading that chapter and I was like, God, this is dark. And I wished I hadn't read such a dark chapter today. Maybe it's because it's like raining and it's gloomy. The whole book is not that dark. There are a lot of beautiful, tender moments, and I think the book is really hopeful. I kind of leave it on a really hopeful note and end it sort of on revolution, and we need to be hopeful for revolution. Yeah, but the book is also contending with a lot of my own, it's part memoir, so you get to really experience my experience with wellness and sort of having this chronic condition and multiple sort of just like being a child sexual abuse survivor. All of those things are like, it's the first time I really talk about it publicly. And so I had to face a lot of things. And it was really intense. But if you read me, you know I go many different places. And if I really can go dark, because I'm really fucking light. And I'm really funny, right? I'm a clown. I really am. So I think like it's fun to sort of, I have to like remind everyone of that, because it's very much like I'm guiding you through it, and I'm really sort of taking you to all of those places, and I believe that that's sort of my responsibility on this earth. I'm here as an act of service. This is my work is hopeful in that sense, because I really believe in us as a species. I think we have a responsibility to one another, and that means sort of contending and facing a lot of the real shit that we don't talk about, the stuff that we hide, and we're like, oh, this, when it pops up. And for me, it was very much somatic trauma. I was just dealing with a lot of somatic trauma and chronic pain, and so how am I? I'm in a very surreal place in my life right now. This book is the most honest work I've made yet, because it's like such a reflection of where I am right now. and it feels really confronting to have people read that. And I'm sort of contending with it each day. It also feels like such a blessing that I get to do this. So it's like both and.
Yeah. Well, I mean, something that I really love that you wrote, was that, capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy wants you to think you don't have a responsibility to think deeply about your existence, And it's funny that you're talking about the darkness and the discomfort of some of the things that you write about in this book, and reminding us that there's also lightness. But I think that, and tell me what you think, because in rereading the book, what I was thinking a lot about is the fact that when you are someone who feels deeply, who feels a lot, and when you are a survivor or a thriver, some people like to call it, of abuse, discomfort comes easily to you. You're always kind of in a state of discomfort. You're always in a state of making yourself uncomfortable for other people's benefit, because you don't want other people to feel like weird. So you're always kind of translating yourself. But I find that, particularly as a writer, as an artist, discomfort, as uncomfortable as it can be, it's the place that I thrive. It's the place that I see myself most clearly. And so I guess one of my first questions, or my second question to you, is, in writing this book, like, what was it for you to really, I'm sure you're in that space all the time, but to take that and harness it into writing a book that that other people are going to receive, what was that like for you? What was that translation like for you?
I think similarly, if I'm acting a bit strange, I'm just worried about this wire. I'm like dancing with myself. We're so similar in that sense that we can go to those very deep places. And I mean, Venus Aquarius 8th house, that is, and North Node Aquarius 8th house, if you know, you know. And so I just can go very deep and like need to, and like that's how I connect with people, and that's why I feel so grateful that I get to write and that people read me. It's incredible. At the same time, the act of like going deep into one's soul and body and fabric of being and tracing all the lines, it's like it's such deep work. It's just so deep, and I didn't really understand it until this book. I don't think I really contended with myself as an artist. You just kind of goes there, because that's the only way I can live. And so it's nice, I think, and we've talked about this kind of like, I felt really isolated in my everyday life a couple of years ago. Now I feel really settled and loved, but for a very long time I felt very sort of isolated, and writing became a tool for me to connect with people. It became the only way that I could actually connect, because I felt like my deep feelings and my deep emotions were kind of laughable in everyday life. People were like, okay, like, I'm so
Calm
intense.
down.
Calm down.
Yeah.
You're so sensitive. Oh my God. Just like really disparaging things about my emotions all of the time, and so I think for me it was really difficult to kind of feel safe in my own feelings, and so I kind of really like, that's why, writing a book is like really great, because I get to just like say everything I need to say.
and you said what you said.
And I said what I fucking said. And so, it's good to kind of be like, okay, there's a place where I'm held and accepted, which is so nice. But the actual act, the alchemical act of pushing that fucking gold into whatever, like, I say shit into gold a lot in the book, and like that is to me like what I do when I write. I'm like repurposing, composting the trauma for the purpose of not just my own healing and betterment, but to share that with an audience and to share that openly, because I think I wish I had that mirror when I was growing up. We are like both that for each other and for ourselves. You know, like, yeah, I didn't know a lot of other people that looked like me or thought like me when I was growing up. And I grew up in a lot of isolation, and that just transferred into my adult life, just like feeling really, really far from people and, yeah, misunderstood a lot. And like, nobody likes you when you whine. Like, nobody's like, everybody's
or
like,
when you tell the truth.
when you tell the
That's
truth, you're
another
like, oh my
another
God.
note that I wrote. Where it's like you talk about the truth a lot in this book. You write that, wait, you know, I can't find it, what I wrote, but you write a lot about the truth, how the truth can be confronting, but how the truth is also the place where we find liberation, that we have to hold ourselves and each other accountable. And that, you know, when we talk about the wellness industrial complex and we talk about this concept, it's like a lot of it is just accepting the fact that, yo, like, we're all on some level complicit, right, in the oppression of others. And to pretend like that doesn't exist is to perpetuate it, even if you don't know necessarily the solution or the fix. To just be able to acknowledge the fact that you're part of the system does so much. And I think that's, I mean, I think that's everything when we talk about this concept of wellness. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what it means to speak truth to power? What, I mean, I saw an interview you did a few days ago where someone asked you, like, yo, like, you're saying shit in this book that's gonna make a lot of people, like, feel like feel a little, like, uncomfortable, and it's because it's the truth. What does it mean to you to be able to, like, speak the truth in a way that might, I don't know, like, get pushback or get you in trouble, you know?
Ooh.
Like that.
Like that. Great timing. That was great. I feel like because I haven't my writing career hasn't had the normal trajectory of another writer, or like what I would have expected my writer to look like.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know. Like, I feel like I've just, it's kind of big and small. Like, I feel like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Sorry, I like lost my train of thought. Can you ask me the question again?
What does it feel like to tell the truth?
Right.
When it's scary.
Yes. Okay. So, in the sense that I think, like, I don't know. I think I like expected, like, to just, like, be beloved and, like, I know it's kind of embarrassing, like, get a $3 million book deal. And, you know, like, be, like, you know, just, like, a New York Times bestseller, you know, all the things that I really once wanted, for sure. And, like, felt very, like, throughout my career, I mean, you've seen this, like, feeling just sort of, like, I don't feel like I'm actually seen by the people in power.
That's what we're taught. That's what it means to be seen.
Right.
Apparently.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, I then had to realize that I was being seen, just in a different way. And then that acceptance and that humbling of being like, okay, yes, I have an audience. I might not get what I think I deserve, but what does anyone deserve? And, like, what am I responsible for then? Changing it and being like, okay, how do I actually be a good writer and not actually think about what I am owed by the industry? Just, like, focus on the writing and let the writing speak for itself. I think that is why I tell the truth. And, like, just, like, I'm saying some really intense shit. And, yeah, like, I'm talking. So the book it's memoiristic, part memoiristic, but it's also part journalistic. And so I'm going into these essays about yoga in particular. And yoga has been completely commodified and distilled into something that's for wealthy white women. That is the culture of yoga. And yet there's no awareness and context of where it comes from and the evolution of yoga and the sort of profundity of yoga and just like the sheer, awe that I have that Vedic Indian Hindu scholars 15,000 years ago were like thinking about the mind and the body and like thinking about evolution. Like that's extraordinary, and we don't acknowledge that. Like nobody acknowledges that. Nobody even talks about it being from India. So it's dangerous for multiple reasons, because then, you look at the fact that, okay, so some people might be like, so what? Everything gets commodified. But the issue here has multiple layers. Firstly, 450 million Indians live below the poverty line. If wellness is $1 billion industry, if yoga is making this much money, why is it that the place of origin is not gaining that reciprocity and earning and so right? So it's like unfair, it's extractive. And then you think about the fact that the United Kingdom drained India of $40 billion each year. It colonized it for over 200 years. So we're talking 40 billion pounds, sorry. So, when we talk then about the developing world, and we're like, developing, we don't think about how they got there and why are they developing. And so, I talk about all of that in the yoga chapter, and I kind of take us into a very historical place and move through it, and also just move through the fact that the British also outlawed yoga. And so Indians weren't even allowed.
Sorry. I'm just like, it's so disgusting.
Indians weren't even allowed to practice yoga. And so until the revival in sort of the 1900s and onwards, we saw, Hindu mystics being allowed into America. And so there was a rebirth of Hinduism and yoga and India. But again, it was sanitized for a Western audience.
It's trendy, yeah.
And then I talk about all of the evolution from there. And so it comes back to profit, and it comes back to extraction, and it comes back to who gets to be well, who gets to have wealth, who gets to take resources from other people and use their labor, and who doesn't. And that is based on racial lines. And that's the truth. Yeah. So the book examines all of that. And yeah, it's gonna make a lot of people mad.
But it's so needed, and we're gonna go to questions soon. But like, God, I have like literally 15 things I want to talk to you about.
Talk to you more.
I like that decontextualization. Like, there's a chapter where you talk about faith and God and how it is removed from this indigenous knowledge that's stolen, right, from the West. And like, you write about how, so you write, a lot of this goes back to language. God should be seen as a neutral term, not tied to any creed or religion or nation. To say something is good, better, less contradictory when it's devoid of faith is extremely reductive. The divine is and can be many things, but decontextualizing a practice from the faith itself is a dangerous alternative. And I love that you write about that, because I feel like so often it's like the only time that something is valid or scientific is if God is not a part of the equation. But so, like, you talk about meditation and how meditation is literally about confronting death and literally about confronting the divine and what is beyond this form, and yet this practice is extracted, and everything about it that is related to the divine is carved off. Before we go to questions, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that's so important when we talk about wellness and industry and our responsibility to each other, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of seeing the results of a very... Capital has become God. We've removed God and put it in capitalism. So it's the church now, and like that's what we bow down to, money. And so that has, I think, deeply affected our interpersonal relations, and also, you know, disconnection from yourself in a divine sense, in a spiritual sense. And again, it doesn't have to be tied to a God. It just has to be a thing, spirit.
Spirit, yeah.
When you're removed from that, and that was very much a part of the colonial arm of like completely disallowing any other religion to exist, or Christianity was really the faith that kind of imposed itself throughout the colonizing world. And we don't really think about that, because that's part of the whole thing. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about the fact that you know, as a Muslim, it's like very clear to me the ways in which Islamophobia exists in this country. I mean, it's very apparent. And so it's sad that faith gets tied to a God that again then gets tied to a religion. Does that make sense? You know? And so the more we're disconnected from this concept of something higher, and therefore, you know, like this sort of responsibility to a goodness, or to betterment, to self-betterment, to evolution, those things have been lost. And so the more we are disconnected from ourselves, the more we're disconnected from the land. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the impacts of our disassociation. And the Anthropocene is a direct result of colonization. So that, I talk about that in a chapter as well, like how to face the climate crisis when it's the results of the elites. All of these things have to be faced.
No responsibility
ever
for it at all.
But, you know, they'll have to eventually. Yeah. I'm very hopeful about that. And to sort of come back to divine and death and God, my 3 favorite things to talk about, I really, really have to say from an individual level that the reason I have a connection to spirit, and the reason I think I can do the work that I do, is that I'm very aware of my mortality. Mm-hmm. And it really humbles me in a way that I'm not like afraid. It's an understanding of how short this life is. And I think that if we had that kind of remembrance each day, just felt how sacred it is to be alive, we would care more. Yeah. We would show up more. We would be honest. We would love more fully. So I think that's why I go there with my work. I have a deep hope in us changing. And I believe that happens through facing the wound. And we need to face a lot of fucking wounds. A lot of fucking wounds. A lot of wounds. So in ourselves, you know, like I lived 29 years not thinking about that trauma. Not thinking about that. I was like, I'll do anything but that.
Yep.
I will fucking, let's just go. Not that shit. And once I stopped running, it was so easy, you know? The work is really hard, but it's really easy to actually just be like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be truthful. I'm not gonna perform anymore. You're just getting who I am today.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it fucking is.
Every day I live my life like that. And it really works out for me. You know, I think that that's what stabilizes me through all of this, is that I get to just be honest. So I'm grateful.
And we're grateful that you're in that place, because then we reap the benefits of reading this work that is so, you're looking at yourself and you're looking at us as well. Okay, I wanna kick you more, but we can't because we have to go to questions. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. For Fariha. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for being here and reading that excerpt. It's like very moving, and I'm really grateful for it. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like writing process. I think it's really interesting that you're blending like memoir and journalism here, and like as a writer myself, mostly coming from journalism, like we're often told not to do that.
Yeah.
We're often told that anecdotes or personal experience are not valid.
the point.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I'm wondering if you can like talk about blending that and why you chose to go that way. I feel like, I mean, part of this book is about like going deep into yourself, so you have to be like memoiristic, right? But I'm curious if you can speak a little bit about that.
I don't know if I explained this earlier, that there was, I feel like because I didn't follow this trajectory, I was like freed of all expectation and limitation. Like I feel really boundaryless in writing. And I'm sure my writing like pays for it. Like I think I remember somebody writing about Like a Bird, how it was very, I can't remember exactly what they said, but they were like, this is unlike any novel I've ever read before. Like it's not at all like, following the sort of form of novel writing. And I wondered if I should it was really confusing to me because I was like, oh, I guess I don't write like that. But I never thought that that's how one tells stories. Like, you just say what you have to say. I feel like for me and when I teach writing, it's really about the energetic blocks that are there that are like forcing you to sort of feel like I can't write like this. But the more I know it sounds a bit like big to be like, just write like yourself, but just write like yourself and see where that takes you.
And fuck the canon. Like you write about that in
Fuck
this
the
book.
canon.
The canon is
Dead.
Yes.
It's dead. Fuck the canon. I fucking hate the canon. And I just also think it's really sexist and also
And racist.
And racist. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that got really real. The canon is sexist and racist. Did that answer your question? Okay, cool.
Anyone else has a question about the book, about
Anything.
the work, about healing, about wellness? Well, I have a question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Let's talk about death. Because I really love what you were just saying. Because for me, anytime I'm spiraling, I'm spinning out, one of the most comforting and refocusing thoughts that I have is that I'm gonna die. And we're all going to die. And it's comforting because it puts this stage of my existence into context. All the pettiness, all the ego becomes kind of irrelevant because you're like, we're gonna fucking die.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna worry about this anymore. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, because you're going to be practicing as a death doula. That's something that's in your future. What draws you, and what do you find the thought of death comforting in that?
Not at
way?
all.
Not at all. Okay.
Absolutely not. I'm absolutely terrified, which is why I'm like, not why, but I'm like, I had such a traumatizing life, and I realized after I kind of pulled myself out of it that that's the kind of work I want to do with people. I'm like, I'm actually really good at this. And I've fought. Things happened to me as a child, and I was raised under a lot of abuse. I'm a child sexual abuse survivor. I'm an incest survivor. All of these things have clarified in the last couple of years, and I had to deal with all of the realities of that. And I could have just disassociated for a really long time, smoked a shit ton of weed all the time, just like kept myself in that place. And then after a while, I was just like, I can do this. And accepting all of it has been accepting death, has been accepting that my body died a long time ago, and that I'm emerging and rebirthing all of the time. And that is so extraordinary. And I think I don't have acceptance of death yet, and I want to. And that's why I sit with Grandmother Ayahuasca a lot, because she helps me with my trauma, but she's just the most magical plant in the world. And being able to do that work has reminded me time and time again what it means to be human and what it means to share this planet with other species, really intelligent species that we do not focus on or care about. And I think like having that connection with this plant and with just, I think, understanding the mortality, understanding that even if I haven't accepted it, I will die, you will die, everyone you love will die. It's just, again, like if we were able to accept this, I think we would just be better to each other, because we just understand how limited it is this time, and how we owe it to each other, actually, to show up and to be present and to live that life understanding the preciousness and the sacred reality of our lives. Yeah, and that's sort of remembering that each day as much as I can helps me go deeper and deeper and excavate even more, and it helps me be a better person, I hope, and a better friend, a better human. And it's humbling. It's really humbling to be like, yeah, this is all we've got.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because you quote W.E.B. Du Bois, who said that white supremacy or whiteness is wanting to own everything forever and ever, right? And it's just like you can't, you just can't.
The money runs out.
It goes away. Accumulation means nothing. We have such a spiritual wealth, and that's what we need to tap into. And I think that's what this book reminds us of, is that what we're craving, that absolution, that thing to fill us, is not it's not any of this. It's within us, and it's such an important reminder. So I thank you. Unfortunately, we have to stop talking, but Fariha will be signing books out back, so please come through. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here. I love you so much.
I'm gonna say degrowth, New York City.
Period.
Degrowth. That's got it in the book. Chapter. Woo!
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Fariha and Zeba, for the wonderful conversation. As a reminder, Fariha will be signing at our back desk. We please ask you to wait to approach the desk until she's gotten settled back there. You can purchase additional copies of Who is Wellness For and Zeba's Carefree Black Girls
Buy the books.
at the signing desk. For those still with us on YouTube, you can find the link to purchase the books in the description. That's all from me. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. Now please join me in giving Fariha and Zeba one final round of applause.